So first of all then, if we're all ready to start now. So Sean.
Monsieur le Connétable, I'm sorry. Monsieur le Connétable, Connétable-elect, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Winston Churchill said, "There's nothing wrong with change if it is in the right direction." It's great to see such a nice turnout this evening, and thank you very much for making your time to come and see us this evening. I have lived in St. Peter for 20 years. My family, formerly Lifeboat, have been here for generations. For the last 5 years, I have volunteered as a centeneer for the parish, and I've met many of you in the process. My time as a centeneer is what sparked my interest in politics and enabled me to become better acquainted with the issues that affect us here in St. Peter. I worked in the finance industry for 29 years, and latterly for myself, owning an accounting service company. I'm a family man with 3 young sons. 2 of our sons, both born in Jersey, are adopted. During the process, we were made aware of the significant problems that we have on our island, where many impoverished and vulnerable children need our support and care. The Children's Commissioner has a hard job on our hands, and I'm keen to assist her in any way I can. Our children's education and success in our community is paramount. We need to create new opportunities for them and build a stronger, more diverse economy in order to secure their education, health, and welfare. Our departing constable, John Reffo, has worked very hard devising a project to build 65 affordable homes in the parish. A total of 240 applicants applied, thus demonstrating a significant need for more in our parish. We need to resolve this issue quickly, and I will work with the Constable and States members to ensure a resolution. Another major issue in St. Peter is the traffic choke point at Beaumont. With the new housing developments, this issue is only going to get worse, not better. We will need to work closely with the Department for Infrastructure to find a long-term solution. Turning to island-wide issues, I believe we should diversify our economy to reduce our reliance on the existing core businesses or economies. If we promote new and evolving business ideas, assisted and supported by the states, with appropriate central governance, we can create a sustainable future. Another key focus is education. Our young people need access to more local degree and apprentice courses, schemes to provide them with a skill set our island needs to help grow our economy. If elected, I will hold a surgery in the parish hall every week, but if you prefer, I will come to you in your own home. Thank you for your time. I would be honoured to receive your vote and serve you, the parishioners of St. Peter, after the coming elections. Thank you.
Roland, in the interest of fairness, Sean went about 20 seconds over, allowing for that short gap, so we'll give you 3 minutes 20 as well. Thank you.
Can I just have a few minutes to write an extra 20 seconds? Are these on? Good evening, Monsieur le Connétable, and members of the parish of St. Peter's. Is the microphone on? Okay, so can I start again, please? Can we start, Richard? Done? Good evening, Monsieur le Connétable and the members of the parish of St. Peter. My name is Roland Tullian, and I was fortunate to be born into an established St. Peter's farming family. And whilst my experience gained from 30 years in the information technology business throughout Europe and the United States, my roots and heart are firmly in this parish. I'm standing as your deputy. The core part of this role is to serve you. There are 2 sides to this. Firstly, to engage, understand, and communicate the thoughts of the parish. On my visiting card, I talk about clear communication. If elected, I look forward to working closely with our new Constable, Richard Vibert, to ensure the parish feels totally engaged in the political and support side of our community. For example, this will include regular parish hall meetings and, for those online, effective use of social media. Secondly, to push forward with the many initiatives underway and listen to ideas for new ones. I will promote the current community support service to ensure that volunteers can help with what may be an easy task for most of us, but is a serious struggle for others. I've met the youth club and want to play a more proactive role in whatever way I can, helping to nurture and inspire our children at a formative time in their lives. Our responsibility as adults is to do whatever we can to help our young in the transition to leading happy and fulfilled lives. The parish has recently received a significant increase in rates from the airport. Instead of just reducing every ratepayer's bill by a small sum, I will support the Constable to use this money for schemes and projects to improve our community, especially the young. I have made good progress towards my aim of knocking on every door in the parish. There are about 2,350 households, so I apologise if I haven't reached you yet. Several topics are dominating these conversations. Firstly, and most obviously, ville de manoir and affordable housing generally. I feel sure that there will be many questions on this subject, so I will not dwell on it here, except to say my wife and I both voted for it in the parish assembly. Others, in no particular order, speeding, traffic, education, pollution, are high up on the list of concerns, and I look forward to giving detailed answers on these subjects, if requested, and any others you wish to raise. However, the one key issue that is affecting our island is population. Virtually every conversation I have leads back to this. Housing, traffic jams, sustainable economy, hospitality, farming, education, healthcare, digital, environment, pollution. The list is endless. It needs to be addressed in a very strategic way, urgently. I'd be honoured and privileged to receive your vote and represent the parish of St Peter's for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, both speakers. The initial speeches are made. It's now open to you, the audience, the parishioners of St Peter, to ask your burning questions of both candidates. Roland will be answering the very first question from the floor. Can we have a show of hand from somebody, please, to open the questions? Don't be shy, we're not going to finish that quick tonight. Thank you. Mr. Willing.
Good evening. We're blessed, if you like, to be the only parish in the island with our own airport. It's under new management. It has allegedly been set afloat to be run by Ports of Jersey, and there's been a recent announcement about their big development plans for the arrival part of the airport, quoting an enormous sum of money to achieve this. Plus, of course, planning permission for 3 large hangars, which I know has upset some people in St Brellard's. Do our candidates have any views on the amount of finance being set aside for this and how the Ports of Jersey could actually pay for it themselves as opposed to put the burden on the people of Jersey? Thank you.
I understand why the new departures is being built. It's because of CAA regulations, and I can bore you with them, but it means it's a necessity. However, what I don't understand is 42 million quid for what is effectively a function. Going in and out of an airport anywhere in the world, fundamentally, especially in Jersey, is something you do as a process to go from A to B. It isn't part of a holiday, it isn't a journey, it isn't excitement, it isn't a treat. So I would like to see that development stripped down to be something that fits that particular requirement, fit for purpose, not an overkill. Some people have had it described as a vanity project. I won't go that far. On the hangars, as I understand, the hangars were built by Ports of Jersey on spec so they're currently unlet. So they're being requested short leases for quite high premiums, which is why they're not let. So, yeah, again, I'm not sure about that. I don't think it should be property speculators. I think they should be building things that are fit for people to use immediately. Also, back on the airport, I don't see anything that's in it for us in this particular development, and I don't see how we're benefiting at all. A couple of things. I've sat in the honoraries like Sean, and what I've realised is the congestion when you're trying to pick up friends and family outside, paying 70p, being shouted at by G4S to move on, it isn't part of our community. We've got to think of ways that the airport is going to benefit us, picking up our friends and family freely, quickly, and cheaply. I could go on that subject for a long time. I think it's just as well we have been killed. So.
In the main, I agree with Roland. However, we do need a reasonable airport in Jersey. The cost of the new arrivals hall, so to speak, is phenomenal. And I would hope that it's being funded by the ports of Jersey, and anything that the states have to come up with will be repaid. The Ports of Jersey is an independent company now, and I would expect that they can fund their own resources. If they can't, then something's wrong. On the warehouse side, yes, I agree. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any reason for them. There's no use for them yet. But I presume they took advice before they built them. I don't know. In fact, how many states members can actually say why Ports of Jersey are doing anything now? It is self-governing, self-controlled, and I presume we can persuade them to reduce this 42 million cost somehow or other. Thank you.
Next question, please. Mr. Hayes at the front. And then Mr. Hayes at the front, and then Joan shortly afterwards at the back there, in front of Kevin.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Oh, it's a bit loud. This is my personal opinion, and I think that we have suffered the last 5 years under a system called managerial government. No matter how strong your feelings are, if you're in our government and you stand up to talk, you're one individual and you're up against a lot of other people. Therefore, I think the answer has to be a community of people together, working together for the good of Jersey, otherwise known as party politics.
Excuse me, John, are you going to come to your question, please?
Yes, the question is, what do you think, gentlemen, about Jersey introducing party politics? Thank you.
I'm afraid I don't agree with party politics. For the simple reason we are a small island. Traditionally, we've had independent choice, and it has worked in the main until this recent change to ministerial government. Now we have a central pot of control in the ministers and to a certain extent their deputies and whatnot. I would like to see more control by independent states members. Nobody controlling or deciding for a particular block vote for a particular thing. I think we all live in different parishes, we all have different ideas about how things should be done, and it needs to be debated, and then a decision made. So, for me, no to party politics.
I think the future of party politics in this island rests solely on how the Reform Party handle themselves and conduct themselves. I'm not talking about poorly, but I'm talking about how they embrace it and bring the island with us. I personally don't think it is right in either size. However, it is clear that ministerial government and collective responsibility isn't working. So that is effectively a party in itself as they block vote according to the policies that have been determined by the Council of Ministers. I don't think, I'm not going to say yes or no, but one thing I'm going to say, we do need some significant change. And I found it's very easy to commentate on the outside because one of the reasons I'm putting myself up to fulfill this role is to totally understand what is happening within the Assembly and within the states of Jersey from within. It's only then that I will have a genuine, a proper view, an evidence-based view on the workings of the Assembly, and only then will I really be able to make true commentary. I don't think I've answered your question, John, but I just think it needs a lot more research, a lot more thinking from people from within. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Now, Mrs. Joan at the back there, in front of Kevin. Yes, please, Roland.
Hello. You mentioned congestion at Beaumont with the traffic and everything, but I'd like to know what's going to be done in the centre of the village. It's absolutely horrendous for walkers and for cars getting out of the junction here, and the back road between the villages has now become a rat run that when I just want to walk between the villages, I'm in danger of my life, quite frankly, and I'm on my own. What about the children? And it's not just Beaumont, it's within the village.
I think it's back to what I said at the, in my opening address. We've just got too many people and too many cars. And also we have roads that are lined by granite walls which can't necessarily be widened. During my travels, I met a lovely lady, I think she's called Yvette, who wants to be able to cross the road from her flat on the other side of the road to go to M&S or the Co-op. And I've looked at it and thought there isn't just space for a stop there to get people across. I totally agree with you. I think serious science is involved in working out how to accommodate this problem. I think, number one, we have to persuade people not to use cars as much. Anybody who's in a car and is in a jam is part of the problem and is causing the problem. I think we have to look within ourselves for that. I think we're going to have to promote better use of public transport. I think the number 9 and the number 8 bus that serve this parish are not nearly as good as the number 1 and the number 15. I mean, that would be a good start. Whether they'll be financially viable or not, I don't know. But I couldn't agree with you more.
This is one of the many complaints we receive as honorary police, is speed around the parish. St. Peter has been lucky in that it had a 20-mile-an-hour zone long before most other places in the island. It has slowed down traffic to a certain extent, but there's always people who don't obey the law. We have a number of 15-mile-an-hour roads where people don't obey the law. It's a problem, and I honestly think the only way we can control traffic is by the use of prevention measures. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, it would be nice to have people out there with guns regularly patrolling the village. Unfortunately, I don't think the state's police are particularly interested. The honorary police might have a go. But the problem is, again, with the honorary police, it is very difficult to get volunteers who will work during the day. And this is where the problem is for you. It's during the day. I'd like to work with our constable to see if we can get something whereby we can try and control traffic better. It might be that we create some pedestrian crossings in particular areas. Now, when I come round and talk to you, if you would kindly tell me where, I can certainly think about it. There's very little else we can do, but try, as I say, slow down the traffic and make some safe areas for people to cross. If we cannot make safe areas for people to cross, I'm sorry, but we're limited. Thank you.
Sean, before you Before you sit down, to avoid any confusion, when you mentioned guns, you meant speed guns, I take it. Thank you very much. Next question, Mr. Surkov, and then the back.
Good evening. Obviously, one of the challenges for the island economy is diversification, and we know that. So I was interested to read about the concept of the digital academy and training the youngsters. So it was ticking lots of boxes till I started reading, and a large amount of money seemed to be being spent on a very, or potentially proposed, property to house it all. And it started sounding a little bit like the finance centre. And I'm not 100% convinced myself that we need that, and that's the best way for the island to spend its money. The training, education, highlands or positions. I'm intrigued to know both candidates' view on that, and also if they have any ideas on how this island meaningfully diversifies its economy.
Subject dear to my heart. The digital academy they're asking for, potentially down the road, I think might be required. But for now, we need to build up some sort of interest in the digital economy by our young people. We don't have enough young people actually learning and studying for the right courses to enable us to produce and have a good digital economy. The start might be persuading schools to change their curriculums to a certain extent, to try and produce interesting curriculums for children. Every child likes to use their iPhone, their iPad. In fact, we can't get them off them. But when it comes to IT itself, there's not a great deal of interest. They're taught how to use Excel. They're taught how to use Word. They're taught how to build an app, create a website. But they do that and then lose interest. They say, this is from my own sons, of course, they say it's because they keep going over the same subjects again and again. So there's no interest being developed in anything that's going to persuade them to go down the digital economy course. I would like to see more young people going that course, and I would like to help with somebody to get that moving. As far as diversification is concerned, I would love for the states to help out evolving economies. Is that the first bell or the second bell? First bell. Evolving companies, anybody coming up with new concepts, I would like to help them out. Not like we did before, where they just lent businesses money that was lost. Crazy. The states must take an equity interest in anything they invest in to make sure that they can, A, control it, and they can supervise it, and make sure it's run properly. Sorry.
Digital economy.
Huge question. On the building, we seem to be obsessed in this island of building things without working out how they're going to operate. And can we just leave it at that? We seem to be obsessed with it, and I don't want to waste my time on that one. Now, I spent 30 years, as I said before, in the IT world. IT world is the most exciting industry. If anybody has ever been and got involved in Silicon Valley or Shoreditch and see what goes on there, it is cool. It really is. And we got to, within the education system, inspire our children that it is a career worth going into at grassroots. Some aspects of the industry, break fix, network patches, updates are quite dull. But the other side of it, working for the app developers, building businesses, or alternatively being prepared to work for entrepreneurs who are coming into the island to expand their particular business is absolutely fundamental. Now, I think we've got to start within the schools, and I'm on the Digital Jersey video, which will come out sometime, end of the month or something. I'm talking about it. And something I've talked about doing within the youth within the parish, making sure they've got updated technologies. And I was mentioning that I would probably use my network of people on video conferencing or Skype or whatever, FaceTime, to introduce them to some people who could inspire them to do it. I think the teachers within our education system are so overburdened with other things they have to do, like ticking boxes and filling in forms, and not being free to inspire these children and these subjects. And I think also quite a lot of them probably aren't as confident about IT as they would like to be to set that good example. I could go on for hours on this one. It's a real passion of mine. But basically, we've got to start with the education, and we've got to make it an attractive subject for them to want to get involved with.
Okay.
Good evening. What are the candidates' views on the states reverting back to a form of committee government, perhaps something on the lines that Guernsey's got? Thank you.
Roland.
Committee government we moved on from it because it was too slow a process and decisions weren't made, if I understand that correctly. I think we can finesse the way we operate at the moment if we are engaged, if scrutiny and the departments are engaged at the outset. I think there's too much of somebody has an idea and they write a paper and they advance a project, they want change a long way, and then suddenly at the last minute they think, oh, we've got to let scrutiny know. So scrutiny get some files like this they have to read, and then they're vilified because they haven't read them, digested them, and understood them within about 3 weeks. So I think one of the things we can do, which is akin to the committee, is engage scrutiny at the process very early on so they can work and learn and understand and critique and do the check and balances in a process going forward. I think that's something that could be tinkered early at the outset, which wouldn't make any major changes, but could have materially good benefits. Yeah, no more comment.
Years ago, we moved on from committee-based government because it was too slow. We've ended up with ministerial government, which is a bit too quick. I'm joking, it's not quick. I think we need something different. I do think everybody in the States should have a say in what goes through, but at the same time, I do not agree with ministers making decisions on the spot saying this is what's going to happen, without referring back to the states themselves. I definitely think we need to change our process of government, and I'm sure virtually everybody who's a candidate for this election has the same idea. We all don't like the existing ministerial government. We don't want to go back to the committee way of doing it, but we want something else that works. And I expect we will all be working on it when we get in the States.
Thank you. Mr. LeGros there, Roger, I think.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. This is a question of both candidates, obviously. I would like to put this question to both of them. I was reading through the manifestos of all the people trying to get elected to our states in this election. Out of 79, there were only 3 people who mentioned agriculture. 3 out of 79. So does that mean that agriculture has no meaning in this island? Who is going to keep the island clean for our tourists without agriculture? Without both, what do we have left? Not a lot. Finance, finance, and more finance. And most of us don't trust the banks anymore anyway. And as I'm part of a local farming family for the last 75 years, I'm ashamed to say I'm overjoyed my son is not involved in agriculture. How sad. Why has agriculture gone so low in the estimation of so many? That is the question, sir.
Thank you.
Agriculture is in the top of most people's minds. It is a shame that it has dwindled so much for whatever reason. Dairy farming, every sort of farming on the island has dwindled. Whether it be because subsidies are diminished, or there is just no profit in farming anymore. But we've got to do something about it. We've got to keep it. Now, this new hemp growing, maybe that will help us a bit. It'll certainly give us something else to think about. I do think we should try as much as possible to help farmers where they are willing to invest. Most of our farmers seem to be calling it a day. And I would like to put a stop to that. As to why there's only 3 people connected with farming, I have no idea why only 3 people from the farming industry are coming up as candidates. Maybe they're too busy. Maybe they are busy running their farms. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm from a farming family, and my father and Mr. Legros were neighbours on Rue des Etches and the farming, so I'm familiar with that. The other thing I can say about farming is there's a certain gentleman here gave me my first job in the summer of 1977, and he successfully talked me out of farming myself because it's very hard work. And it also has to be more of a vocation than more of a traditional career. Unless you're passionate about it, I could understand why people don't go into it. Now, farming also, if I've got 500 words to put into a manifesto, because of the economics of it, it doesn't actually get in there, unfortunately. However, the cultural reasons and the heritage reasons for farming in this island are essential to protect. The soft benefits, as American corporate speak would say, are we have 2 brands out there that are world-renowned brands out there, and that is what attracts, those brands attract people to Jersey, not only the tourists, but people to come and live here and enjoy our place, and we have to protect that. I think we have to protect, we've got too much nitrates in the soil, people are telling me. We need soil regeneration, and I think we ought to be focusing subsidies on areas like that in order to protect the farmers to do that. I know there is considerations out there to try and use natural nitrates and natural fertilizers within the farms, and I also know that there's a risk to certain farmers by taking that on, i.e. blight could take out a whole crop because it is an area of the unknown. I think we ought to be underwriting those particular risks to ensure our farmers, without taking too much financial risk themselves, they have enough with the weather, don't they? They take enough financial risk themselves, so we should support them through that change. This is fundamental to our heritage and our culture.
Thank you. Mr. Lehuissier.
Thank you, Mr. Conatable. I wonder if the candidates could tell me what they consider to be the requisite skills of a politician, and could they say where they possess those skills and where they do not possess them? Thank you.
Thank you. Skills of a politician. Exhibit A. It's like salesmen, you know, 2 ears and 1 mouth. We really have got to understand what people want. And I think it is very important that we make considerations, we make decisions based on what we're hearing and not running off on our own personal little ideals and our own personal challenges. And I think that is absolutely essential. I think courage is required, courage of the convictions, and the convictions you've assimilated from those around you is important. However, I don't believe courage should move into belligerence, whereby you start chasing something and you just firmly start believing yourself because you're believing yourself. And I think, again, you've got to be able to listen, and you've got to have the ability to apologize, you've got to have the ability to change if proven wrong and necessary. I have to say that going through this, we can call it a process if you want. I mean, I've been to some interviews in my life, and this is the most brutal. I have to say. And I don't think I've given so. So we are really, really being tested and judged seriously by you. So it's you will make that decision. And also you will hold us to account, hopefully, if elected, if we go through the next 4 years. And if people don't ring me up and contact me to tell me where I'm going wrong, I'll be disappointed. Thank you.
Very good question. All my working life, I've been connected to the finance industry, or parts of it. But 10 years ago, I moved into an area where I saw an awful lot more, let's say, smaller businesses on the island. I install software and I design their accounting systems, so I see a lot more of smaller businesses. So where does that give me expertise? Okay, I know a bit about accounts. I know absolutely nothing about farming. I know absolutely nothing about tourism, hospitality, anything like that. But you would hope that throughout all the candidates that are coming into the States now, there are some that do know something about each subject. You would hope. As a deputy, though, you're representing your parish. And if you're a deputy in St. Helier, you're going to get very much less talk about agriculture than out in St. Peter. So I think, as far as we are concerned, the candidates from St. Peter, we have to put our foot down and start learning a lot more. That's all we can do. We will learn the process of farming and what the problems are in farming. We will learn the process about visitor numbers and how we get tourists here. We will learn about a lot of things that we're not used to, but we have to. Thank you.
I've got one at the back and one in the middle here. Which one, whoever's closest? Okay, and the lady in the middle here next.
Hi, just a thought of the candidates' views on the current makeup of the chamber in terms of the number of people we have and the fact that we can have a high percentage of people who actually almost get the gig by default. They're not actually voted in. I mean, are the numbers right, do they feel? Have we got the right experience? And should we still continue to have senators, deputies and constables attending the chamber?
I understand Clothier and his report decided that there was too many. And we hear all the time about the fact that there are too many in the States. I personally cannot understand why we've reduced the number of senators, because senators are in on an island-wide mandate. Deputies are in on a parish mandate. Now, there was talk of connecting a lot of parishes together to make districts. And we were going to end up, and I mean by we, I mean I think, as far as I can remember, it was St. Brelade, St. Peter, and St. Juan with 1 or 2 deputies. How could those 1 or 2 deputies represent the interest of each of the parishes? They would have to, they both might come from St. Brelade, for instance, I don't know. But it certainly wouldn't be the same as our consistent process, whereby a deputy for each parish is elected. That deputy represents the parish. Senators represent the island. And I would rather have had less deputies, more senators, and I'm sorry, but I do agree with the constables being in the States. Thank you.
I think our predecessors, the deputy, Christina Moore, standing for senator, given her political aspirations and given the fact she's had home affairs for the last 4 years, is the right move to make. If you are going to be responsible for bringing policies together and departments together which have an island-wide effect, you should have an island-wide mandate. And so the balance of, and I think other deputies haven't done so, who are going to be running big budgets, not going to mention who will probably be voted into their position by 800 people, 600 people, 700 people. I think that balance is very, very wrong. On the other hand, we have a parish system, and that must never change, in my opinion, and therefore we've got to have parish representations. So I think in simply, whether there's too many or too few, I'll go back to a comment I made beforehand. When I have been, hopefully, within, I will be able to make a much more informed judgment on that. But yes, there needs to be some juggling, and I don't think anybody who should be running a department or a role should do so without being invited to do so by the whole island. I think that is a fundamental change that needs to be considered. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sally Wood. I'd like to ask you that if you are elected, what will you do to protect us, the residents that will be living nearby to the new hospital catering unit? The committee has approved the plans last week, and several sanctions have been put on the particular workings of the thing. And I would just like to know, if these aren't met, what will you actually do to keep us happy as residents? Thank you.
I was at the planning meeting when this was approved, and I've done a lot of planning meetings recently. And if I remember correctly, the cooking can only take place between 8 and 5, whereby the air extractors that will make the noise to clear will only be allowed from 8 till 5. And obviously there's the exceptional circumstances. That was number one. And the other one, I think it's 19 car parking spaces for 40 people. And where are they going to park? And there's a fear that they will park in private residential streets in the area. Now, there's two ways you solve this one. You either, be very aggressive about it and stick to the letter of the law, which is going to cause conflict between the food factory and Whites and Pentagon, etc. Or alternatively, you start with open consultation and consideration. So what I would propose doing, and if elected, I'll volunteer myself to do that, is sit on and call it a neighbourhood committee, so we can sit and review it. Initially, I would say quarterly, and hopefully it'll bed down and be successful and move that out to 6 monthly. But initially quarterly, so people can air their views in a non-confrontational environment and just be very sort of grown up about it. These things never are successful if the stick is used and threats are used and fingers are pointed. You're 5 minutes late, you're doing this. It's got to be a will with goodwill with everybody to ensure that it is a successful transition.
The cook-chill process has been around since the 80s. And I'm not au fait with the decision-making process of the health department or why they wanted to move it from the hospital out to St. Peter, but they must have had a reason. Now, if we think about it, they create the food for not just the General Hospital, but Overdale, St. Xavier's, all sorts of other hospital sites. And why does it have to be in St. Helier? They've chosen St. Peter Industrial Park, probably because it is an industrial park. Nobody wants it on their back door. You'd hate to see that sort of operation at the end of your garden. So I must admit, I do think they've made the right decision in choosing that area in St. Peter. Where do we think, if it causes a problem, I think we would have to do something about it very quickly. Now, Rue Bocage, I think, backs onto that whole industrial area. If they were going to cause some sort of noise problem during the daylight hours of between 8 and 5, then I think we would have to get the Environment Department in to check, to make sure it is not excessive, and if it is, we can do something about it. But as far as whether it's going to be successful or not, I don't know. It seems to me like a good decision, but I'm not privy to making that decision, so I don't know.
Next question. Right down the front, Mr. Donaldson. Adamson, sorry.
Good evening, Mr. Constable and Mr. Constable-elect. I'd like to ask the candidates, we hear a great deal of all the things that they believe that government could achieve, might be asked to do, and absolutely nothing about the limitations on the capacity of government to deliver solutions. We've heard one of the candidates say that he would like the government to make equity investments in technology companies, and the government has absolutely no expertise whatsoever to do that. So I'm disturbed a bit by that, but I've taken a bit of a liberty in not getting to my question immediately. But my question is, given the propensity to ask and seek public funds for any project that comes along, what is the candidate's attitude to the independent Lifeboat proposals to set up a new service which they will presumably need or seek states funding for? Which way would they go on that? Thank you.
If we're going to talk about the Lifeboat, it is a terrible shame we've got into the situation we've got into, where effectively we now have 2 lifeboats and 2 lifeboat services. The RNLI have not said they're leaving the island, and they have quite a lot of money in their pocket for this island, from this island. The new lifeboat service, I suppose, yes, they may come for a subsidy of some sort. But I would hope, like the RNLI, that it's self-funding by contributions from people. It is a very, very good service, but I do not understand the reason for 2 services. If one wins out against the other, fine. I'm not an expert. I don't know. But I do not agree where there is a charity-funded service doing the job and doing the job well, that we need to subsidize a new service to do the same job.
I don't know how they got into that situation. A breakdown of communications and poor management seems to be the reason for it. Nothing fundamental. If you can't knock heads together to sort it out, I'm confused by it, really. I understand then the desire to have an alternative, to take control of it. But what I think is, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm writing my will. I want to leave some money to the RNLI, which I think is about 75% of bequests to the RNLI in pool. You know, how do you decide which one? And over a period of time, wills don't get changed. I think it's just all rather confusing. But when I first heard about it, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have access to a boat, and I've done my VHF course, I was thinking, you know, Mayday, 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 this is Amelia, 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 give you my positions, 4 adults on board, we're on fire. Oh, by the way, would you say Nandy Hibbs? You know. It's an unfortunate situation, it's an unnecessary funding, and I think the big lifeboats probably go out in that sort of weather conditions. I think it's only 3 or 4 times a year, something like that. Invaluable to go out, but I don't think it warrants having 2, and it was an avoidable situation, I would suggest, and an unnecessary drain on public resources is my view.
Another question for Mr. Bernet down the front here.
Like Roger, I've read the manifesto booklet, and most people standing in election basically just gloss over the finance industry. Mention was made about diversifying the economy, but until we do that, the island remains heavily reliant on the finance industry, which has come under great scrutiny from the outside world. Do the candidates think that the island is doing enough at the moment to defend itself against allegations of being a place that facilitates money laundering and tax evasion?
Crikey. I wish Moz Scott was here. I think she's the tax expert, isn't she? What is absolutely fundamental, it's the same with any service industry, service business, service economy, your brand and your reputation is absolutely fundamental. And we must not, under any circumstances, allow that to go because of any scandals that go on. We don't want the Jersey papers, shall we say. Now, I think that the question is, you know, tax evasion, tax avoidance. I think one's legal and the other's immoral, I think. Can't remember. But I do happen to know that there are ways that, I mean, we can manipulate tax to our advantage, which is depriving the, you know, the public purse of money. I think there's a thing called rollover funds, and I think if you have a traditional investment that pays a dividend every year, then that you pay income tax on that dividend. I think in a rollover fund, the profits get rolled over, and then at some stage in the future, you can draw those out, and that becomes an investment, which becomes a capital gain, which involves no tax. They're fundamentally the same things. Now, if I know about this one, I'm sure there are many, many others out there that are being exploited and depriving the states of Jersey of their tax. But in honesty, we must protect our data, essentially, and we must be brutal in our desire to keep ourselves out of the front pages, financial pages, for the wrong reasons.
I think Jersey's been doing very well fighting off any attacks. 20 years ago, the finance industry was something completely different. It's now far more regulated. It has meant that we get attacks from right, left, and center, but we are dealing with them. The finance industry is still there. It has changed considerably. There is far less trust business on the island than there was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But that seems to have been fixed by virtue of the fact of more banking, more funds. The process is changing, but we are now a white economy. We are not doing what we used to do. It is virtually impossible to money launder money here now. Virtually impossible. If you tell me, you'll give me an example of somebody doing it, well, I'd say fair enough. But the point is, every business on this island is regulated, and quite often, the External Affairs Minister has done very well visiting OECD and all sorts of other jurisdictions and telling the right story about Jersey and been selling it well. We are okay. We're doing good business. I think Brexit will give us more business. Why? Because we're here. We are an intermediary between Europe and the UK. What sort of business? I don't know. Better minds than mine will come up with the correct business. But I do think we are okay now, and we will be okay in 10 years' time. I don't advocate concentrating everything on the finance industry, by no means. Let's change, and change where it's needed. But for now, it's okay. Thank you.
Mr. Conotab, candidates, good evening. This subject hasn't actually come up tonight so far, but it'd probably start a hornet's nest. The population growth and immigration. We hear it every election. What, if you are elected, are your views on it? What are you going to do about it? Bearing in mind that if we go down the route of controlling immigration, it may well affect industries in the island and our care and health and everything else that we depend on for our everyday lives. Thank you.
Everybody's talking about population. Can you hear me? It's a problem that we have to deal with. We need people coming into the island to provide the services that we cannot provide ourselves. We need it. At the same time, we don't want any more people. We would rather keep our population as it is now. I don't think that is feasible. We have a certain level of requirement in our island now, and various industries need people from the outside. The visitor numbers for tourism are getting better, but it's going to be harder and harder to get the people to work on our farms and in our hospitality industry. After Brexit, we have to be very careful that we give out the right permits, let's call them permits, to let people in temporarily to do the jobs we want. Now, we might have to pay more for that. Okay. But I do think we are going to increase our population over the next 10 to 20 years. By how much is the problem? There's talk about if we allow 700 people in per year, we will need so many Marie courts and everything else. I don't think that it's going to come to that. Population control will control itself eventually. As long as we can provide enough people to keep the industries that we do have going, I think we'll be okay. But we must control immigration. Absolutely.
I mean, every industry or business seems to be going out with a begging bowl saying, I need more people, I need more people. And justifiably so, because the licenses seem to go into one particular pot. I haven't seen a document that has taken out the silos that we've been talking about by a new chief executive to say, what should this island look like to population-wise to sustain the businesses that we have at the moment. So I don't know if we have a finance industry of X, how many restaurants does that need, how many hotel rooms does that need, how many hire cars does that need, and how much land do we have that's been farmed, and what's the turnover, and how much staff is required. I haven't seen that big picture document. Until we've got that big picture document, we don't know what we're aiming at. That's one side. The other thing is we have got to take a lead on making sure our individuals use their jobs more effectively and efficiently, and I'm talking about the use of technology. Now, I'm going to say something to you about artificial intelligence and robotics. It is a fact that I would say 70% of the finance industry can be replaced by robotics within 15 to 20 years. This is real. Ernst & Young in the UK are using robotics for 1.2 million hours a year of traditional people's work. It is going to happen. The COOs of businesses are going to take this in because it makes business sense. Robots, by the way, they don't have sickies, they don't go on holiday, and they don't have pensions, but they need to be taxed in return. Now, what we've got to do, that's the fear bit. The positive bit is we then have to retrain and reskill those people to complement other industries, and that's the way we'll have diversification. This is a 10 and 15-year plan, and we've got to wake up to it, and we've got to recognize it, and we've got to put the measures in place to get there immediately.
That's Mr. Kirk.
Good evening. As you all realise, probably our taxes will be rising next year to pay for hospitals, schools and so on. I'm wondering, the 0-10, once the UK leaves Europe, do you think we could be scrapping the 0-10? I believe it's costing the island about £100 million a year. Do you think we can get away with dumping that one?
First on this one, thank you.
I'm not even going to pretend to know what the economics of that and the value of that are behind. I'm afraid to say that's beyond my pay grade, and so I won't even try and waffle on it.
I don't understand why 010 was brought in the first place. But I do think we need to put a stop to it as soon as we can. And if that takes waiting for Brexit to happen, well, so be it. I could never understand why we had thousands and thousands of companies paying a £500, it wasn't a tax, it was a charge, per annum, and then just wipe it away, clear it, and then instead dump GST on everybody. It was crazy. Most of my colleagues in the industry as well couldn't understand it, but it supposedly came from Europe, and we had to do it. I think we can immediately put a stop to it. I think we don't have to tax more. Certainly people in the middle ground to lower ground will not be taxed anymore. I expect we can get rid of the 010 concept very soon. Okay.
Any other questions, please? I can't see anyone. Mr. LaCroix at the front here. Sarah.
Good evening. Two questions in one. What's your opinion of assisted suicide? And if the parishioners of St. Peter's wanted you, would you bring a proposition to the States?
Suicide, what are your opinions? If the, yeah. I think it's you first. Yeah.
I agree it's necessary. It's something that we should have because, well, my mother-in-law was one that lasted a long time when she shouldn't have. I do think in certain circumstances it should be good. Sorry. There are times when people are kept alive for no particular reason other than the doctors can keep them alive. I'm not an expert in it. I cannot say when that might happen, but I do agree with it. If St. Peter asked me to bring a proposition to the States, I will bring a proposition to the States. Okay.
I think this is probably the hardest question, isn't it? And you know, I'm very lucky with my mother-in-law, I have to say. He says as his wife is just there. There was a documentary a couple of years ago, and based on the Zurich business called Dignitas. It's called Dignitas for a reason. It's about dying with dignity. And one of the individuals that was filmed was the Guernsey resident, one of the two that I think are bringing up this particular case. And he had, if you can have an aggressive motor neuron disease, he had an aggressive motor neuron disease. And he had to leave his home. He couldn't take his kids with him because they would have been part of the, could have been held and arrested for conspiring to help him to commit suicide. And so he went into a soulless building in a city he didn't know, and to do something that he in a lucid, clear mind, wanted to do to prevent himself from the lack of dignity of a particularly horrific death. Now, if he was allowed to stay in Guernsey, he could have had his children around him, he could have had dinner in his favourite restaurant the night before, he could have been in the comfort of his own home. That guy was a very bright, very lucid individual and made a decision. I think that is the absolute key, is to make sure that people who enter into that decision, a decision I would hate to have to do or to be part of, are lucid and clear and listened to, and that has to be, I think, vetted and controlled very carefully. So yes, I would, but the wording of the proposition would be absolutely key and would take a lot of research and care, I would say.
Any more questions in the hall, please? Any at the back there?
Good evening. I'm concerned about the erosion of the tax base. I noticed there was a recent amnesty that 1.5 million was raised from people who'd previously avoided or evaded tax. I think that was in the JEP this evening. Roland Hewlin has referred earlier to roll-up funds. I know there's plenty of use of things like companies and trusts. I'd like to know what the candidates' views are on aggressive and abusive tax systems.
Roland, I think you're first.
Got it. Mos Scott, where are you? I think we're down to the debate of avoidance and evasion, aren't we? And the immoral and the look. Anybody who avoids tax or evades tax, whichever the illegal one is, means that somebody else is paying for your share to go into the coffers. So any aggressive immoral ones, I think, are the same as the evading ones, the illegal ones, and should be stamped out. We live in a society where the majority of people don't have the opportunity, because they're on a more of a pay-as-you-go system, to take any advantages of these so-called loopholes. They earn their money, they pay their tax, they go home, and they're the ones that suffer from any form of, I'm going to call it shenanigans for want of a better word. So I don't know what's involved in that. I don't know what scrutiny is required. I don't know what in-depth analysis and forensics is required to unearth this, but clearly it's essential and must be done.
Tax authorities everywhere are getting more clever. They appear to be setting up, well, certainly in the UK, they're setting up systems whereby the people who give advice can be as much to blame for the people who take the advice. If this continues, I would see an end to aggressive tax schemes. I can't say they're going to stop now. I can't say they're going to stop in 5 years' time. But the mechanisms are in place for them to stop them. Also, these amnesties appear to be working to a certain extent. People are coming forward. Hopefully, more people will feel it in themselves to stop this aggressive evasion or avoidance and come forward. I cannot see how many jurisdictions in our world can continue this process. The tax systems everywhere are putting in place mechanisms to put a stop to it. I would hope, David, that it will end. But
Sarah, right down the front. Sorry, Liz. Father Michael.
Good evening, everyone. Mine's a constitutional question. Jersey is rightly proud of its ancient parliament called the States. It's one of the oldest in the world. And what in many jurisdictions would be called the Speaker, here is the bailiff, who's an independent legal officer of great learning and experience. And it's been vetted, or it's been in the media recently that some people would like that position to change and have another vote in the States to choose one of the members to become the Speaker of the States. And my question to both candidates is, what does each candidate think? Do you want to keep the present system, whereby we have someone who's legally trained to interpret the law? I'm not asking you to comment on the particular bailiff we have at the moment, but on the office, not the person. Just want to make that clear at the beginning. Thank you. Sorry.
I don't particularly see a problem with the current bailiff continuing as he is. If we were to replace the bailiff with a speaker, we'd have to make sure that the speaker was well trained enough to control the states. Now, if consensus is that we remove the bailiff and replace him, then let's hope they give sufficient time for somebody to be trained up enough to do the job properly. But for now, keep the bailiff. Thank you.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And also, if we have a speaker and a bailiff, that's another salary to pay, isn't it? In all seriousness, I haven't heard anything that tells me that we need to divide that role. And unless there's anything fundamental that is brought to the table to suggest that, then I think we have very many other important issues to address in this island. And I think we ought to let sleeping dogs lie on that one unless we're presented with new facts that mean that should change.
So Liz, got Tom there, thank you.
Mr. Constable, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask the candidates, do they believe that the green zone policy in the Ireland plan is sacrosanct and should not be interfered with? Thank you.
Yes, you're first, Roland.
Can I cough a few times? Right. It's down to population again, isn't it? Listening to the planning inquiry at over the 65 houses, one of the arguments put forward against it was that the green zone should be protected until all other avenues have been explored. So that's one side of the debate that has to be considered. However, as the population grows, without a doubt, we're going to run out of space of the brownfields, or we're going to be living in very, very congested areas. The other side is we must protect our heritage of farming. We've already discussed that one this evening. It is our culture, it is our beauty, it is a wonderful thing to behold for the island, certainly in a country parish like this. I don't think you can say sacrosanct because we are in an evolving world, but I think we have to be very considered about that. Now, I think that's going to come up in the 2020 Island Plan, which hopefully myself, not Sean, will be debating. And I think that will cause a lot of debate. I will go back and say I intend to communicate with the parish, and that is something that I will take guidance on, so you can help me make the decision on that behalf. I fobbed that off a bit, I know, but I think it's a big one. It's a big one.
In the last island plan, there were a number of sites set aside for housing. Some of these were greenfield sites, but they still haven't been built on. I'm not an advocate of just willy-nilly building on green sites. Every alternative must be investigated before we have to go down that route. However, I don't think it's possible to house our young people in the future without taking some greenfield sites and making them brown, for whatever reason. The current plan for the houses in the village, that is a greenfield site. I agree that that be built on, primarily because the use of that land has changed. The farmer who did use that land has moved his herds elsewhere. I cannot advocate just deciding at any point in time to build on greenfield sites, but I think we will have to at some point. And hopefully in the 2020 plan, we can have a nice argument about it and come out with the right solution.
Mr. Capone at the back.
Good evening. If either of you, or one of you, will be elected, as an elected member, you will become, a virtue of office, as being a corporate parent for our looked after and vulnerable children in the island. Where do you see further investment is needed in services for children and young people?
Right, can we start with the fact that I agree that we need more investment in young people. The Commissioner has a good job to do now. We, for too long, have missed out on vulnerable and neglected children in the island, partially because we don't know about them. We're not aware of them. I think any service that looks after children should be funded properly, without an issue at all. The point is, I cannot think of any reason why children's services should ever struggle to get the right staff to do the right job. I think any service that is looking after children should just get whatever it needs to provide that service. Thank you.
I think Sean and I have both said quite clearly, you know, children are our future. And I believe that as a result of this recent inquiry that a woman has been appointed in the post on the States to make the necessary recommendations or action the necessary recommendations. I think the first thing you've got to do is listen to her. We've got an expert in place and listen to her. I'm not sure I got the rest. It's such a broad question. I didn't really understand hear every word of it about, you know, caring for our children, or is it the very, very vulnerable? I'm not sure exactly where you were coming from. I mean, suffice it to say, I can agree. We have to do everything to educate, nurture, and protect our youth. And I think we have to listen to the experts that have been put in place to advise us on how to do that.
Before I ask another question, I'm just thinking of our two poor candidates here. They've had 18 questions so far from the floor. Could I suggest we have two more burning questions before we allow them to relax at all? I've got Mr. Willing over here. If there's nobody else in the hall before I...
You've got one to the left as well.
Okay, so one Mr. Willing and then Mr. Lewis here. Okay.
Mr. Connertab, I'd actually like to conduct a little survey, if I may, for perhaps the most contentious issue that the states have faced and are still facing. That is the hospital. Sorry about that. The financial burden that is placing on all of us currently, in the future, our children, our grandchildren, possibly our great-grandchildren. Could I just ask the candidates if you're in favour of the hospital being built on the current site? Just raise your hands. Okay, thanks. Can I ask everybody here if you're in favour of the hospital being built on the current site? Please raise your hands. Yeah, exactly. Right, so both of you, whoever gets in, can you carry that forward to the States, please? You can see that, I would say, just standing here, less than a third of St. Peter would like it built on the current site. In other words, 2/3 of this parish would like the whole thing reconsidered. It's an enormous project. I know we've dithered, but the man behind it has gone. We have got a golden chance to get it right one last time. Thank you.
I think it would be useful for the record, actually, if both of you could just give your, for the sake of this is being recorded, your view, please. Would you mind, Roland, you're the first one up. Yeah, just a really short, yes, I do or no, I don't, would be useful, I think, for the sake of record.
I've probably written 10 letters to the EP on this. I've been on I think I've been interviewed on ITV, probably with the BBC as well. It is very, very simple. If we are going to look after the health of this island for the next 50 years and investment for the next 50 years, and bear in mind the capital cost of a hospital is 3% of the overall spend on the life of a hospital, it is a major, major, major decision. And I've been saying, we need better, faster, cheaper, safer. We need the 4 options of that. And I am absolutely convinced that the Gloucester Street Hospital doesn't fit any of those 4. And I will say, quite simply, on the finances alone, there's evidence, and I've got it actually here if anybody wants to see it, that the waterfront, and I'm not supporting the waterfront necessarily, within the Gleeds report of 2016 states quite clearly the waterfront will be £150 million cheaper and will be 4 years, 9 months quicker in the build. That is enough evidence for me to have a review, to go back to the drawing board and get what we actually deserve in this island for the right amount of money. Thank you.
I'm more concerned about what it's costing us day by day to delay this decision. We've seen the arguments they've had. It's been to the States several times and keeps coming back to the same site. It's costing us $22 million a year to delay the decision. That's phenomenal. Yes, I was always an advocate of moving it somewhere else. But what I've heard since I've started this whole process leads me to think, get on with it, build it in the current site. I hear what the people of St. Peter are saying. Stop and reconsider. I'll accept that. If that's what you want, that's what I'll do.
Okay, Roy, you had the last question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Connertab. Very quickly, who would the candidates like to see as Chief Minister?
Can I think about it? I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, were at the Hustings the other night in St. Peter when this question was posed to the senators, or the candidates for senator. It seemed at the time that everybody wanted Ian Gorst to be the next external relations manager. Nobody said very much about who was going to be the next chief minister, but I expect there was a few candidates there that wanted the post. I would assume one of 3, John LaFondre, Christina Moore, and who else? I'm not sure about anybody else, but... Oh, Lyndon Farnham, sorry, yes, of course, Lyndon Farnham. One of those 3 would be an ideal candidate, and I think at this stage I would pick Lyndon. For his experience, that's my opinion.
Do I have the last word of the evening? Right, I'm going to make it long. We don't know who the contenders are going to be. We're in the middle of an election. Who knows who's going to get in? We haven't got a hope of knowing who's going to put their hat into the ring if they receive the necessary votes on the 16th of May. I would like to see somebody who demonstrates leadership skills, courage of their convictions, integrity to be put in that particular role. And I believe the process is on about the 17th, whether it's Sean or I, will be courted by whoever it is to receive their particular vote. And those are the questions I'm going to ask very, very hard. I think we need a change. I think our current Chief Minister is a very decent, hard-working man, and I think he's very caring. I think he's a very intelligent man. But I think just over the hospital alone, he's demonstrated a lack of leadership skills into driving that process through. He's allowed infighting amongst those people who've been trying to get this hospital together. And I think he should have got them in the room, knocked their heads together, and taken control of the situation. So I'm afraid I think he is a no. Who comes through? I think it'll probably be somebody who is not known at the moment in the realm. I think there are certain candidates who have been in the back benches equivalent scrutiny who are doing very, very well in CB sports and the betting at the moment, and are looking very likely to lead the polls. And I think there's a lot of talent there that we need to consider instead of just checking on the runners and riders that have been, oh, sorry, that was a bit of a pun, wasn't it, the bookies? Checking the runners and riders that are being put forward as the obvious candidates today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I say, we've had 20 questions now. That's 4 times as many as the senatorial candidates had in this very same place just a few days ago. So I think our 2 hopeful deputies have well and truly been well quizzed this evening. And I would like to ask you to give them a round of applause for putting themselves up and exposing themselves to your questions.